Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the July Executive Meeting. A special welcome to those of you joining virtually, either from the public or our other members. If we could start off with apologies for absence, what did we receive?
Thank you, Chair. So I've received apologies from Councillor Alan Ashbury and Councillor Leanne McIntyre, although I believe Councillor McIntyre is joining us virtually.
Okay, I think probably we need to add John Skipper as well. Yep, who's off on holiday at the moment. Everybody okay with the minutes of confirm and sign the minutes of the previous meeting? Yeah?
Chair, while you're signing the minutes, I just want to draw to your attention that at the last executive, the executive considered the end-of-year performance report, and that was considered before there was an opportunity to consider it at the P&F committee. We said that we would receive feedback, any feedback that they had, and there were two items in particular that came up in the end-of-year performance report. One was that the committee asked that the performance indicators relating to planning enforcement be reviewed, particularly looking at the targets. And I think the suggestion was that it's reviewed in consultation with the Planning Applications Committee. I can confirm that that will be undertaken. And then the second item that came up was that the committee was asked if we could ensure that the portfolio holder is aware that a reduction in the number of meals at home customers has been occurring, and that there are issues with increased costs of the meals themselves, both in terms of the cost of the raw materials, but also the need to consider looking at the prices again in the future. My understanding is the portfolio holder is being kept up to date with those issues. Those were the only two items that came out from the discussion at scrutiny. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If we move on to declarations of interests, members are invited to declare any interests. No? Okay, thank you very much. Move on to item 4 on the agenda. Questions by members. Any questions by members? No. Thank you very much. No. Very good. Okay, we move on to item 5. So the short-term plan to the end of 2023. So this plan has been prepared based on the foundations inherited from the previous administration, has taken a few different directions as well, and has changed some of the priorities. So there's a mixture of old and new, and a change in pace in various places. It's obviously there and clear for everybody to read. Was there any questions or discussion points around that? Yes, Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, you've highlighted it there, but I think there's a few of these in the short-term plan that are already in June and July and have already happened. So is this something you're planning to update on a regular basis with updates of what's happened, so we've got this as a working document?
Yeah, so the reason it's got some stuff in from June is because of the Frimley Green by-election, obviously the need to keep things in Purda under control in terms of communication, etc. So that's the reason why, for completeness, it includes things in June. In terms of the fundamental point you raised in your question, absolutely, we intend to publish regular updates on progress. We haven't actually confirmed the first date for that yet, but we will get back to you on that. Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Any other? Yes, Councillor Cope.
Thank you, Leader. You obviously touched upon that you felt there were a few things where you were changing the direction. I just wonder if you could, give us sort of the key things that you think are different to what the previous administration would have done, because obviously reading this, I think the the ambitions are very noble, but I just want to get a feel for what you think you've changed.
Thank you. So I think there's a bigger emphasis on inclusion, particularly around some of the communities that we need to outreach to. There's also a focus on young people as well in some areas, particularly looking at the provisions and prioritisation of parks going forward in the deprived areas. There's obviously the emphasis, the acceleration of the emphasis on the drive to net zero as well. So it has a mixture of the different themes that we had within our manifesto document, and that's the subtlety, is the translation of those into either actions, faster actions, or investigation of what the actions should be in those particular areas. Councillor Mears.
Thank you, Leader. I've got a question regarding the support for those greatest in need section on page 20, number 4. Secure 7 new homes to help address housing pressures. It's a bit vague, so I was wondering if you could elaborate on what those 7 new homes are, what they're for, and have you taken into account officer time, considering that in the base budget review, the environment and community section has seen a couple of staffing cuts?
Thank you. Yes. Councillor Lisa Finnan-Cook, would you respond? Thank you.
Thank you. I think the purchase of these 7 properties has been underway for quite some time. Progress has been slow with it. I'm happy to hand over to Mr. Stevens if you want a more detailed answer to your question. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Finnan-Cook. Thank you, Councillor Mears. So the 7 properties under the Local Authority Housing Fund are classified as 6 main element properties and 1 bridging element property. The main element properties are predominantly for people within the resettlement scheme, and we envisage that that would be largely through Homes Ukraine and our Ukrainian guests, and accommodating those families, because the main element properties are typically 2 or 3 bedroom properties. Sorry to use the word property so many times. And then the bridging element is effectively earmarked or ring-fenced initially for the ARAP, so the Afghan Relocation Assistance Programme. And that is a slightly larger property, which would be either 3 or ideally 4 bedrooms. We're working with Mount Green, a registered provider, to locate those properties, and they will manage them.
Great, thank you both.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Any other questions? No. Okay, so what are we requested to do? Requested to resolve that the short-term plan be approved, yeah? Thank you. Okay, we move on to, having gone paperless, this takes a while. We move on to the base budget review outcome report, item number 6 on the agenda. I have a few words to say on this before we open up more generally. So this report outlines the process followed in the base budget review and the outcomes of the process, following the meetings between portfolio holders, the leader, and finance portfolio holder. These councillors were supported by the Chief Executive, the Strategic Director, Finance and Customer Services, the relevant senior officer and service managers from the service being reviewed. Important to note, Councillor David Whitcroft's dedicated contribution to this process to enable successful completion overall. All service areas within the council were reviewed, and the results are contained within the report. And although not all proposals were taken at this stage, pending further work on business cases, it is a credit that every service offered a substantial contribution to the process with a spirit of openness and transparency. The in-year target of savings, a generic term for the combination of service efficiency, additional income, and service reduction was achieved, but there is a modest shortfall in later years, which may be filled by maturing opportunities. However, it's better to have a known shortfall than to have a potentially unachievable target. By way of explanation, a service efficiency is budget that can be removed from the base budget at a reduction in service levels. In most cases, this can be from staff vacancies that have been held vacant, and the service have identified that these no longer need to be filled. Additional income can be generated by increased demand or increased charges or a combination. In case of increased demand, this reflects the position from the previous year's outturn or the trend that is already being seen in year, and is not therefore a spurious target, but based on the demand levels already demonstrated across the service in question. Additional charges are introduced mainly to reflect the higher cost that the council is facing and has already budgeted for, and to ensure that discretionary services are not being subsidised from the general revenue account that all residents and businesses contribute to. A service reduction represents a conscious decision by the executive to reduce or even cease the delivery of a service to residents and businesses. These decisions are not taken lightly and have been arrived at with careful consideration of the impact on residents and in particular the vulnerable in our community. The base budget review was undertaken in the face of the severe budget challenge facing the council, outlined in the medium-term financial strategy, and also highlighted in the recent peer review only last week. The council faces the unpalatable task of closing the budget gap over the short period of the medium-term financial strategy, which is not an easy task in the current financial climate, but one that we are committed to in both the short-term plan and in the administration's key manifesto themes. The year one target of £500,000 was achieved. Later year aspirations were not quite reached, but that is based on the requirement to be prudent about the certainty of delivery around these future year savings, and thus only those with a high degree of certainty in terms of both value and achievability have been included. It should also be noted that as part of the process, many more proposals were put forward for consideration, but only those listed in the report have been taken at this stage. It remains a real possibility that some of these others will be revisited during the budget setting process later this year and possibly at future base budget reviews. Whilst thanking all officers and councillors who took part in this process, particularly Councillor McIntyre and Mr Watson for their time and energy invested, I would like to highlight in particular Parav Degum, who from a standing start managed to coordinate diaries, set up meetings, produce the information packs, record the review outcomes and draft the report, as well as deal with the added curveball of a change in leader and portfolios in mid-flow, staying calm throughout the process. Sincere thank you to her. Any questions, members, for myself, or the executive, or indeed relevant officers? Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you for the detailed report. As you know, this is something that has happened for the last few years, and it's, as you say, it's a bitter pill to swallow to be having to look at cutting services and obviously trying to increase income. You say this budget's been met, but obviously at this point, not all of these things have happened, like income from Frimley Lodge, etc. So you've hit your 500,000 based on these things happening as per the review. And as you've alluded to, obviously, if we don't hit those figures, I'm guessing you're going to have to revisit some of the other things. One of the things that does stand out is parking. Obviously, it was a massive subject last year. And I know that it was asked if we were going to increase parking, we should maybe do consultations and things like that with residents, because it's obviously a thing that affects people. I remember conversations in the chamber about not increasing car parking in town because it will stop people coming into town. And I note that this is affecting all car parks, and it's effective for the 1st of October, which means I'm guessing that will need to come to an executive pretty soon, because they need to be given 6 weeks or so to increase pricing. So I'm just intrigued to see how that's going to affect, because historically we had a conversation piece about increasing ticket prices for car parks in town, which obviously didn't sit very well, is going to stop people coming into town. It hasn't done that, but I know people have dropped off, and it'd be interesting to see the figures. I haven't seen the figures recently. So that's a particular one I pick on, because I know, as you know, that that's going to be one that residents are going to pick on and obviously hit everybody over the head with.
Thank you. Councillor Garrett. I'll take that one myself, even though the relevant portfolio holder is here today, because they're just back from holiday, so it's a decent thing to do. It's obviously a very sensitive topic, car parking charges. So we tried to strike a balance between recovering the increasing costs that we're facing and the need to plug the gap in the budget with the impact that it will potentially have on residents and businesses. What we have asked the officers to do going forward is look at a parking strategy and build something a bit more holistic to understand what the opportunities are, to make sure we strike that balance between income generation and making it ourselves easy to do business with, and obviously easy to visit as well. So we'll come back to you on that more widely at a future date. Councillor Rise.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that point, well, I remember those discussions when they took place, and it wasn't actually regarding the town centre charging. There was actually more or less wide support for increasing the car parking charges for the town centre. It was more of the rural areas. However, I do accept that the 5% increases for everyone. I would just also stress that when that decision was taken, the costs of managing the car parks was much lower in terms of inflation and interest rates. So it's a different ball game now. We're in a further position behind, so the increase does need to happen in terms of to be able to the car parks to get anywhere near being able to sustain itself. Whereas the 10% increase that was from the former administration was brought in after many years of no increases, so it was kind of a big jump with low interest rates. Now it's a much smaller rate increase with inflation that's much higher than the 5%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rise. Any other questions? Councillor Quinn?
I'm very happy to see that the large transformers in the London Road Recreation Ground are due to be removed, and that is going to generate a saving for the council. Have you appreciated the fact that that land will need some landscaping or tree planting or need looking after, and that could take away from the saving that will be gained by removing those large transformers?
That's a new one to me, so we'll certainly look into that and see what remedial works will be required. Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Councillor Cope.
Thank you, Leader. Just one that caught my eye in this is the reduction in the number of grass cuttings in the borough. I don't know about the Leader, but it's probably been the most prevalent issue that I've received contact from residents since being elected, is the cutting of both borough-maintained land and county-maintained land. Is the saving of £1,500 really worth it, given the importance that our residents place on this issue?
Thank you, Councillor Cope. Can you refer me to a specific page on that, would you?
Page 28 under 4.8, recreation and leisure. Sorry.
Thank you.
Can I answer that question?
I haven't got to page 28 yet, so you're more than welcome, Councillor Rise. Thank you.
So obviously this falls under Councillor Skipper's portfolio, and I'm just repeating the answer that was given at the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee, whereas this is a reduction of 1 out of 12, so it's reduced from 12 down to 1 cut per year on the land that's owned by Surrey Heath. We're all very aware of the difficulties that happened during May of the County Council's verge cutting. That's now been reduced quite significantly, so that reduction is a reduction of 1 cut per year out of 12 months down to 11 months. I can hand over to Mr. Stevens to provide clearer response.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Rice. Yes, I think this is about ratios more than anything else, isn't it? There is and has been a large number of complaints in relation to the reduction of cuts on county land when it was handed back, effectively when the agency agreement terminated on the 1st of April. And that did drop from 11 or 12 to 4, and that has had a substantial impact. Invariably, we cut, or rather our contractor cuts 12 times per annum. It's not evenly spaced through the year. And ultimately, the officers that monitor that contract feel confident that reducing from 12 to 11 is not going to have a detrimental impact, and certainly not on the scale that we've experienced in relation to the reduction from 12 to 4.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Yeah, I've got that. Councillor Wheeler?
Thank you, Leader. Mine relates actually to a point that I did raise in the performance and finance scrutiny, and in particular to the increase in costs for the joint waste solutions and the conflict between increasing the cost of recycling green waste versus our directive to increase recycling. And the question that I didn't ask that evening was whether or not there was any direct correlation between the per head cost when it comes to people dropping out. So i.e., if we have a 10% dropout rate as a result of increasing the cost to our residents, will this have a per head increase in cost versus encouraging more people to use it by perhaps promoting it at a lower price? If I could have clarification on that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Rice, have you got any?
I don't have the specific figures to be able to answer Councillor Wheeler's question. I will have to hand over to Mr. Stevens. In terms of the increase of the cost, I do stress that this is a discretionary service which is provided by the council, and the garden waste fee has been set to cover the direct cost of collection plus an element of the administrative and management costs of Amy, JWS and Surrey Heath Borough Council. So there is a requirement, as I mentioned on a previous answer with regards to car parking, that with the increasing of costs of running the service, there is a need to also increase the subscription fee. However, I am going to pass over to Mr. Stevens to provide an answer on Councillor Wheeler's specific question regarding the statistics.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I am very much led by our experts, who are JWS. As part of the base budget review, JWS as an entity brought forward this as an income generation opportunity, although as Councillor Rice says, it's not necessarily income, it's covering the costs of the service. They very much feel that this won't have a substantial impact on drop-off rates. Now, clearly we will monitor that, and if that is the case, then we may very well review the increase in fees. But as I say, JWS are very much the experts and do not believe that that would be likely.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. I seem to remember in that discussion as well, we benchmarked some of the fees being charged versus other boroughs in Surrey, and we were significantly cheaper for what is a premium service. Is that not correct, Councillor Rice?
Yes, that is correct. And the increase that is being proposed in the base budget review is bringing us in much more closer alignment with the 4 authorities within JWS, within the Joint Authority Partnership as well, and wider outside of Surrey as well in terms of benchmarking.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler, did you want to come back, or is your hand?
If I may, please, Leader, thank you. Just to say that I'm surprised that we haven't done a modelling to say if we lose 20 householders in Surrey Heath, the cost goes up by X. So I'm surprised we haven't done that, because with the best will in the world, if you have got a lorry traveling within a given area, the majority of the costs are the people and the vehicle, and so therefore I would have thought that modelling should be done as part of it. And to Councillor Rise's point, I haven't checked recently, but I do know that very recently I had, not recently, 3 years ago, the last time we looked at these costs, I had residents in one particular road in Chobham whose bins were collected by Woking, possibly not the best example of good budgeting, but whose bins were collected by Woking, who were paying less than the people whose bins were collected by Surrey Heath on the other side of the road. So I obviously trust that we have done that modelling, and that is completely true, but it hasn't always been the case. But I am surprised that we haven't done a percentage drop-off modelling to see what the impact would be on the costs. But thank you. We'll watch, as we said.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I wasn't aware of the example you provided. I think it'd be very interesting to look at. Hopefully there was just a mistake. I don't know of any residents within Surrey Heath now that has their rubbish collected by Woking. I suspect that with Woking's financial position, they're no longer cheaper than Surrey Heath. However, and also with regards to the modelling, just because I don't have that figure to hand, I don't believe that hasn't been done. We were presented with and the assurance by Joint Waste Solutions during the base budget review that the increase would not result in a significant drop-off in terms of subscriptions. You will always find that there will be people who will end their subscription, and there will also be people who will join the subscription. It's a fluid system. However, I will speak with Mrs. Stevens and with JWS to make sure we have those figures for you.
Just if I may, just to be clear, the road in question has one half of it is collected by Woking because they're Woking Borough Council, and the other side of the road is Surrey Heath Borough Council. So it wasn't that Woking was collecting Surrey Heath's rubbish.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Leader. Clarification really on page 31, 4.14 Camberley Theatre. Replace old boilers in theatre with new efficient boiler or air source heat pumps. So funding is to be identified. So I got the impression from that there are grants out there. Assuming that we get the grant, that's fine. If we don't get the grant, does that mean the £10,000 saving in 24-25 is not a pucker figure because you haven't got the grant funding? And is it possible to clarify, because I couldn't make out, does it mean we're also looking at solar panels? I can't remember if the theatre's already got solar panels on it, or are we looking at solar panels to put on the theatre as well? Thank you.
Councillor Rice, do you want to take this one?
I can't answer the specific question with regards to the 10,000 because that's not under my portfolio, but with regards to the climate change adaptation measures, it doesn't currently have solar panels. It's on the part of the climate change action plan is looking at the corporate estate of where we can. I will hand over to an officer to be able to answer the question regarding the 10,000.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. So the intention regarding the one-off costs, the investment, we very much see it as invest to save. Ideally, that money would come from a third party, from an external grant, but if it doesn't, then I think it would be a call on our capital programme, and there'd be, I think, clearly a strong business case to justify that investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Any other questions?
Chair, if I may, I had a brief note of the issues that had come up at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I think we've covered all of them so far. There was just one other one, which was that there was a query around the increased income from sports bookings and how realistic it was that that money would come in. From recollection, I think the feedback that the committee had was that much of that income is already coming in. It's already been achieved through an uplift in activity since COVID. and therefore there was a relatively high degree of confidence around its deliverability. But just in case there were any follow-up questions on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rolls. So I think that's covered all the items that were raised in P&F. I think Councillor Quinn, thank you.
So sorry, I've just had a chance to look a bit more thoroughly. Relates to the point that I raised about the London Road Recreation Ground, the removal of the power station. It says in the proposal that it would be £15,000 funding to be identified to remove the power station, but the annual saving from the removal of the standing charge would only be £10,000. So surely there would be a loss in the first year from doing that. So I'm just wondering why the report indicates a saving of £2,600.
Can you pick that? Mr. Roberts, do you know?
Leader, so the savings identified in this paper are revenue savings. They're savings on the revenue-based budget. In order to achieve that saving, we would have to have a one-off cost. That cost would come out of our capital budget, I think, and therefore the revenue savings would still be achieved in the first year. I think that's the technically correct answer.
Thank you. Councillor White?
Page 32, back to parking again. The car wash at Main Square net income based on 2018 figures, current market rates are being evaluated. What does that mean? Have I read it wrong? There is no car wash in Main Square anymore. Is that the income that we'd get from the car parking spaces that we now have available, or are we going to have a car wash in the Main Square again?
It's the second. We're going to have a franchise in the square again, and therefore that's the revenue projection. Based on the current market rates, it may be that there's a bit of an upside there if there's been any inflation in those rates over that period, yeah? So yes, we will be reinstating it. Any other? Councillor Rice.
Thank you. There was one other point, just going, Mr. Roberts kind of jogged my memory in terms of points that were raised at the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee was the SAC provision on page 33. Just want to provide, Mr. Stevens did provide an answer, and I just want to kind of add on to his answer. And I know it was from Councillor Wheeler, so I just want to provide further clarity for her. It is not a full stop, it's a reduction of it's the removal of the provision of black sacks to the residents in question, and the reduction to one delivery per year of the same number of the same provision of recycling sacks as well. So I just wanted to provide an added bit of clarity onto that one.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. Any other points? No. Okay. So we are asked to. I'm going to have to get two laptops for this. We're asked to resolve the proposal set out in section 4 of this report be agreed, and the implementation as appropriate by the executive in line with the plans. Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is item 6, I think. Item 7, thank you. Item 7, which takes us into the realm of the finance reports, I believe. So we'll start with the revenue outturn report. There's obviously 3 of these coming up, as you will all know, and I've got a few comments on each one. Maybe just to start with, as noted previously, Councillor McIntyre, portfolio holder for performance and finances, on a well-deserved holiday, and registered her apologies appropriately. So I ask members' forbearance as I, ably assisted by Mr. Watson on the detail, seek to fill in the gap within the executive today. In addressing all of these financial outturn reports, I would just like to thank the Performance and Scrutiny Committee for their diligent work. So starting with the revenue outturn report, the first report presents the outturn position of the Council on its revenue budget. The Council across its services is reporting an underspend of just over £100,000. This reflects the diligent work carried out by officers, firstly around setting realistic and sustainable budgets at the start of the year, and then by monitoring and adjusting to pressures across the services during the year. More pleasing is that the magnitude of the variance across the year-end forecast throughout the year has decreased and followed an expected pattern. This indicates that we're in control. The list of variances over 25,000 in the report explains the reasons for variance. The Executive is also asked to agree the carry-forward requests. It should be noted that these requests to bring forward budget from the year being reported into the current financial year. The requests are governed by guidelines. For example, it is not just a roll forward of unspent budget, but must be, and previously has been, marked for a specific purpose. And generally, the work or purchases still need to take place. And to not carry forward the budget will create a pressure within the current year. May I also draw your attention to the glossary of financial terminology, which I hope you will find useful. And please contact Mr. Watson if there are terms that you come across in this report and the two that follow that you would like to be added to the glossary for future updates, so we keep it relevant and up to date. I'm happy to take any questions now from members, deferring to the experts as required. There's a comment there from Councillor Wheeler. Can anybody read it? My eyesight is failing me. Okay, somebody keep an eye on that and see if we can pick up what the issue is. Any questions from anyone? No? Okay. Do you want to just check that there's no question there? From the previous one, thank you. So we'll move forward then.
Leader, if I could just ask Councillor Wheeler to, because I will not see that comment, could you please email it directly to me and to Mr.
Yeah, it's just to say that it's already £5 higher in Surrey Heath than it is in Woking, and Woking have already put up their charges this year. I've just done an online check.
Sorry, Councillor Rise, are you...
Sorry, I'm just going to hand over to Mr. Stevens.
Hang on, are we a bit out of process here?
We are.
We're out of process
Councillor Wheeler,
here,
if you
so
could email
I think-
that to me,
I think if
the
you
point's
could
been
take
made,
that
thank
offline,
you.
that'd be great, yeah? Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Okay. So we are asked to... I'm going to have to get faster fingers as well. This is oh, there's embedded links, is there? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Okay. Fair enough. So the Executive is advised to resolve that the spend against the approved revenue budget for the period 1st of April, 31st of March and the end of year outturn be noted, and the carry forward of budget 2022-23 to 2023-24 be agreed and carried to the 2023-24 annual budget. Agreed? Thank you. Okay, we move on to the capital outturn report, where I also have some comments, you'll be pleased to know. This report gives the year-end position on the capital programme for the Council for the last financial year 2022-23. Capital budgets differ from the annual revenue budget in that they are generally set for the whole project, which could possibly run for 2 or more years, and thus bridge over a year-end accounting period. You can see that in many cases the original in-year budget has been rephased to match the anticipated spend profile over a period of time. Some of this rephasing has already taken place during the year and was highlighted in the Q2 and Q3 reports presented and agreed by the Executive. Annex B shows the amount previously rephased and the additional budget rephasing to be agreed now, following the outturn at year end. Similarly to the revenue carry forwards in the previous item, these projects are still considered as part of the Council's programme, and to not rephase the budget will create pressures on the programme, or more likely mean that the project will not go ahead or complete if already commenced. Any project not yet started will be subject to a full review of the original premises around costs, benefits and deliverability before any green light is given for it to commence. Again, I'm happy to take any questions with the same caveat on support for the detail. None. Okay. Very good. So the executive is advised to resolve that annual capital expenditure for 22-23 of 1.952 million against a working budget of 2.380 million be noted. The budget provision of 8.833 million be reprofiled from 2022-23 into 23-24. 7.853 million as previously identified in the budget report in March 2023 to the executive, with a further 979,862 identified at year end, 31st of March 2023, and included in Annex B be approved. The final capital prudential indicators 2022-23 be noted, and any comments or recommendations from the Performance and Finance Scrutiny Committee of 12th of July be considered and noted. Are we agreed? Thank you. Last but not least, the one I know you've been looking forward to, the Treasury Outturn Report. This report is one of 3 reports that have to be presented to either council or a relevant committee delegated to receive them. It reports on the Treasury performance for the last financial year, and more importantly confirms that we have not breached any of our prudential or Treasury indicators and complied with our Treasury strategy approved at Budget Council in February 2022. Prudential indicators include our operational boundaries for debt and borrowing limits, whilst the Treasury indicators control who we can lend money to, how much, and for how long. In terms of Treasury income, funds are lent out based on cash flow needs, and this is based on ensuring the security of the funds, the liquidity of the council where we need the money back, and finally there is consideration of the return of the investment, e.g. the yield. Yield is always the least of these, and the other two will not be jeopardised just to achieve a greater return. By its nature, this is a report that can be quite technical, and I'll be more than happy to pass on any tricky questions you may have to Mr. Watson. Any questions? Yes. Mr. Roberts? None? None, okay. I feel I'm a few pages behind again. You'll have to give me the lesson on this later. Okay, so the executive is advised to resolve that the report on Treasury management, including compliance with the 2022-23 prudential indicators, be noted. Are we agreed? Thank you. So we now move on to agenda item 10. Executive working groups. Okay. Okay, so obviously there's been a slight, a few changes here related to the changes in responsibility and various other things. Is there any questions on this? No? Okay, so the executive is advised to resolve that the revised terms of reference for each working group be adopted as set out in Annex B in this report, and the revised membership of the working groups be agreed as set out in Annex B of this report. Are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you. So we move on to agenda item 11, which is appointment to outside bodies. Again, similarly, reflecting a few changes after the Frimley Green countermand. Any questions on this? No? Thank you to relevant members impacted by some of the changes. The executive is advised to resolve that. Sorry, Councillor Rise.
I just note, obviously, there's still a few vacancies left open. is it possible to delegate the responsibility for filling those places to the group leaders rather than it will be required to come back to executive mid-year?
Mr. Roberts?
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to say that there was already provision in the Constitution to delegate that decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rise. Obviously, we welcome nominations in due course from any group leaders as they come about. So the executives resolve that the revised appointments to the outside bodies available for general nomination be agreed. I'm sorry, Councillor Gowan.
Reference Miss Gomes. There is a name on there that is not a councillor. Proposed changes in July 2023, Mrs. Heather Gibbs. Can you confirm the situation? Is it because that can be nominated by the council for anybody to go there?
That is correct. That is correct. And therefore, a nomination was received, soundings were taken, and we believe the person to be fit for the role to represent the council.
Thank you.
So we'll start again then. So the executive is advised to resolve that the revised appointments to the outside bodies available for general nomination as agreed as listed in Annex A. Revised appointments to outside bodies reserved to specific positions as set out in Annex B be noted, and attendance by the appointed members at meetings of the bodies listed. Annex A should be regarded as approved duties in accordance with the members' allowances scheme. Are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you. We move on to item 12. Which requires me to exclude the press and public. So the executive is advised to resolve that under Regulation 4 of the Local Authorities Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information, England Regulations 2012, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the ground that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act as set out below. Does the next bit read as well? Just agreed. Agreed?